What's up, IQ Patreon supporters? It's me, Nola Gold, here with the first ladder showcase video. In this series, which we're going to be putting these videos out every week, we're going to showcase the deck we've been playing on ladder, as well as giving you information about matchups, trends, where we see the deck going, possible tech substitutions, and you get to see the first one ever. So let's get right into the deck. Today, we are going to showcase a deck that I built called Ashe Kenchum. Some people might call it ice fishing, but it's Ashe plus Kench. Getting into the deck list here, the idea behind this deck is that you play Ashe to freeze and Kench to eat. The thing about Kench, whenever you capture something with Kench's acquired taste, the unit strikes Kench, and so its health is usually the problem with getting enough captures to level him to then obliterate the units that it did eat. And this is kind of important because you usually see Tahm Kench paired with healing. You see Tahm Kench Soraka was the most obvious deck coming out of the new set, but if you pair it with freezes as well, then those units don't do any damage to the Kench. And right now, in this particular meta, when we see Lee Sin and Atrocity galore, the freezes are actually quite good in the meta as well. So alongside the Kench, it's good, but then also it's generally good in the meta. So starting at the top, we have Brittle Steel. This is the cheapest freeze, being able to freeze something real cheap. Very important to have a lot of Brittle Steels to be able to keep up with aggro as well. Draws when you have Brittle Steel early and can have a favorable trade early can snowball you into being able to set up your Kench and then getting that online. We have Omen Hawk. It's just one of the best one-drops in Freljord. Being able to get a buffed up Kench is nice, as well as also getting buffed up Ashe, where it doesn't die to a lot of the 3 damage removal or trade with anything on the turn it comes down. It's also an early blocker. We have Icefell Archer. This is just a great card. It can freeze through spell shields if your opponent has Bastion. It comes down early, can block fearsome units while also freezing. It's great at punishing development as well when your opponent has the attack token. The Icefell Archer is huge. You could also, again, being a freeze, pair it with the Tahm Kench, and then as we'll see as we get down the list, even more interactions for the freeze with the Archer. This is a freeze control deck. Starlit Seer. 3 mana, 2/3. This card, I think, is very underrated and has been for a long time. Starlit Seer, we don't have the most spells. If we look at it, we have 11 total spells. So that's not the most spells for a Starlit Seer, but the 2/3 stat line is decent against aggro as an early blocker. But then if you pair it with Kench, Kench actually produces a spell every turn. So you passively are growing the top of your deck. Not the most insane, probably could be replaced, but I think it's probably the best for what we have in this spot here. Troll Chant, this is one of the better tricks to come out at Targon's release, and the Troll Chant's great, being able to, we have some low toughness units whenever we look at it. Ashe only has 3 toughness. Also, we're going to want toughness to go with the Kench. Sometimes the Troll Chant is nice if you try to eat something with the Kench, and then your opponent buffs it up in some way to maybe kill the Kench. You can Troll Chant it to just alleviate that. Another cool thing to do with Troll Chant is to get your opponent's units less down to 0 when you have a leveled up Ashe. We didn't talk about Ashe too much. I guess we should cover the other champion. But Ashe, whenever it attacks, it frostbites the strongest enemy. So it's calculated whenever you attack with the Ashe, their biggest thing will be frozen, which is going to be very huge because that's generally what's going to be able to trade with the Ashe. And you pair that with some smaller freezes like Brittle Freeze, Brittle Steel, and then they won't be able to get your Ashe off the table even when you're attacking. But whenever it levels up, it can remove blockers because 0 power units can't block. So that's another time that sometimes if you have a leveled up Ashe, the Troll Chant, the freeze from the Ashe plus the Troll Chant on something smaller can completely remove blockers. Avarosian Trapper, this is just a well-statted card. You get a 3 mana 3/3. That's just good stats, but you get an Enraged Yeti in the top 3 cards of your deck. So that's going to be a 1 mana 5/5, the Enraged Yeti. The 1 mana 5/5 is going to be huge for a couple things. Mostly, it's good at maintaining a board. It's good at pressure as well. But then it's probably going to come down because if you play this on 3 on a turn that you also play Kench, so you can actually play the 5/5 and then also have the Kench develop at the same time. It's kind of big. Also, if you happen to draw multiple Kenches, it's nice to put the Yeti underneath the Kench with Bayou Brunch, the Bayou Brunch spell, the champion spell for Tahm Kench. We also have 3 of Flash Freeze, very important. A lot of times you want Ashe. Ashe's champion spell is also Flash Freeze. And just having a 3-mana hard freeze is huge at countering Atrocity, as I mentioned earlier. And also for removing Lee Sin's entire kick. Because if you freeze him, he won't kick. That's pretty big. And then also we can just pair it with the Tahm Kench Eat. In a lot of matchups, that's very safe to do. Conley Tavern Keeper, this deck does take a little while to develop, so the Tavern Keeper is huge against aggro, being able to heal. Another reason why I included 3, because you don't always play 3 in Freyord mid-range decks, is because sometimes you don't have the freezes set up with a Kench, and Kench will take some damage, and you can heal it back to full with the Tavern Keeper after getting a couple of eats off with the Acquired Taste. Next up, Ronfang Wolf, one of the best cards to pair with all these freezes. Whenever it strikes something with 0 power, it'll kill it. Going back to that Troll Chant, you could just even attack with this and then Troll Chant something down to 0. Oftentimes you'll freeze something in a combat, so you attack with Ashe and Ronfang. Ashe will freeze the big thing. Ronfang will try and eat it. If, say, you're playing against Targon, they have Pale Cascade to pump it up after the freeze. That would kill your Wolf, and your Wolf probably won't take out their unit, because you're attacking in their biggest unit. It probably has more than 3 toughness. Since it has no power, since it has power now, it won't actually strike to kill it. So the Troll Chant is a nice combination to make sure that the Ronfang does kill after the more common combat tricks. Ronfang Wolf's great for that. Of course, we already talked about Ashe, Tahm Kench. Adversity and Hearthguard is just good stats, 5-mana, 5/5. Since we're playing this game that tries to eat, the games can go a little bit longer with Tahm Kench. I mean, Tahm Kench comes out on 4. It's not going to level up for like 3 turns at least. So we expect to go, unless we have a very aggressive draw with multiple trappers, we expect the game to go to like round 8, round 9. And so getting the Hearthguard down, making the future units that you draw even bigger is where you want to be. Next up is Rhymetusk Shaman. This card has seen almost no play in the... no play at all in the meta, but with Rhymetusk Shaman we have some nice combos going on with this deck. Around start, Frostbite, the strongest enemy. Again, the strength of freezes right now cannot be understated, but one really cool thing about Rhymetusk Shaman, and I've done this a lot in Expedition, is Rhymetusk Shaman, you pair it with the Wolf, because the Ronfang Wolf wants to strike something, so you don't have to commit an Ashe to attack. If Ashe doesn't show up, you have that repeatable freeze effect to pair with your Wolf to make it good, but it's exceptionally good with Tahm Kench, because it'll Frostbite at the beginning of the round, no action needed, and then you can just start off the turn by using Acquired Taste on their biggest unit, which is now their smallest unit because of Rhymetusk Shaman, with no penalty on your Kench. Next up, Harsh Winds. Gotta have it. Two hard freezes for 6 mana is big. It's also really good with Ashe pushes. You have to be careful. Like if you have an Ashe, or maybe if you're playing against an Ashe with 2 of 5 on the level up, whenever it attacks, if you Harsh Winds at burst speed, it'll go right into a level up. So not only the 2 that you target, but then their last remaining big unit will also be frozen, and all 3 of them won't be able to block with the Ashe attacking. Finally, to round out the deck, I'm playing 1 Howling Abyss. It's a card that I wanted to try. As I said, a lot of games go long, and if you play against control, it could go even longer. So having a nice 1-of that can generate some card advantage and has some good closing potential, despite the RNG. If the game goes on, you'll eventually get something good. You get level up Katarina, get a level up Thresh to pull out your champions. There's a lot of level 2 champions that this can hit. And just generally generating card advantage is going to be strong. That's kind of the idea of the Howling Abyss at the top end of this deck. So all in all, the whole deck, the big idea is just freeze their stuff, eat it with Kench, freeze their stuff, eat it with Wolf. So a lot of eating going on in this deck. I hope you enjoy this deck and that it does well for you on ladder. Personally, I took it from Plat 4 up to Plat 1. I'm about 1 win out of Diamond so far playing this deck. I think it will also be good in tournament play where people like to play those two decks as well, focusing mostly on targeting Lee Sin and targeting the War Mothers, like the atrocity builds of the Shadow Isles for your combination. So I hope that this guide can really put you on a track to have some success on ladder, because that's the goal. But then also, open you up to a new archetype to get you ready for possible tournaments as well. One love, baby. Let's get into the games. First up, we'll see a pretty popular deck, Discard Aggro, one of the aggressive decks of the format. This opening hand, Conley Tavern Keeper is great against aggro. We do decide to keep the Wolf, which isn't necessarily great, but paired with Ashe can be very good at removing their strongest units every turn. And we see our opponent kind of starts off slow. No one drop, does have turn 2 Battlecaster, nothing to go with it. That's going to allow us plenty of time to set up this Rhyme Fang this turn, Ashe on the next turn. Now we can start taxing them their largest unit every turn. We even were able to bank 3 spell mana on the first turn to be able to have Frostbite available with this attack. Safely going to be able to just farm a unit this turn with the Ashe and all turns in the future as well. The biggest thing to look out for in this matchup is to make sure they don't go too wide on you. You want to keep the board as narrow as possible because of Battlecasters and crowd favorites, and then also keep some freezes to manage their quick attack champions. Jinx leveling up is one of the scariest things because it can provide directed damage to the Nexus that you can't really interact with freezes. So you want to make sure that you are continually pressuring those units with either Rhyme Fang or, as we see here, Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench, great combination, as we talked about in the idea of this deck, but we're going to see it in play here. Being able to pair it with freezes to be able to just eat the units. And one thing to note is that this deck is also going to try and attack us with Puro Cannon, making these elusive units. We don't have any elusives to block, but Tahm Kench, even without freezes, can just eat those small 1/1s over and over again. The 6 toughness stat line is really high in this matchup, so going to be difficult for them to actually remove it since all their removal is damage based. And looking at this turn here, deciding whether to develop, because you really want to be putting on a counterclock as well, so where they can't draw out of it. We are at 13 Nexus health, so they could get enough reach to actually burn us out. Like we see this Jinx here. It does level up, which makes it 1 power. Going to survive the Wolf, except we do have Troll Chant. So the Troll Chant is going to save some health on our Ashe, but then reset that leveled up Jinx, which was played well by the opponent, back down to 0 power to make sure that the Wolf clears it. And then now that allows us to use our acquired taste on one of the Puros, and instead of having to use it on the Jinx. Yeah, and this board's just completely dominated. We're at 8. They only have 1 card in hand. GG. Next up, we see Trundle Tryndamere. Trundle Tryndamere is usually War Mothers. We're going to be the aggro in this match, which feels kind of weird when you have a 2/6. But this Tahm Kench is going to be fine for clearing out stones. Weirding stones is going to be a prime target. You could also just eat Trundle to clear it out of your way, even if it's just for a turn. Then they're going to be forced to remove the Kench to get their Trundle back while we pressure them with the Avarosian Trapper. The Trapper is nice. I decided to pass here because it feels like they would Catalyst, but they didn't Catalyst. So now I come with the Trapper. It's going to be an Avalanche. The Avalanche I also thought was going to be a play last turn, which is why I didn't play it, but waiting to play this here does tie their mana up a little bit. We did bait out the Avalanche with the Trapper, which makes room for the Wolves. And you see this Volfeast come off, but Troll Chant to keep this thing alive while also pumping the Yeti that's going to be on top of our deck from this Trapper is going to be huge. Having a 6/6 Yeti is nice if they happen to develop a Trundle, being able to attack into it. And we pick it up this turn, but we could potentially have drawn it on the next turn. So starting with the Kench might change the way that they develop or respond, and not let them know we have the Yeti off the rip is kind of important. So now playing this Tahm Kench could probably discourage them from playing Weird and Stones, which is fine. You see him play Catalyst before the attack. So now we got to go with the Yeti. And we're going to send everything but the Trapper because we don't want to trade resources here with this Spider. even though it would mean we'd get in for the extra 6. I would just want to keep as many units on the board as possible, really force the opponent to actually have some mass removal. Alpha Wildclaw is the play. I think if we play a Rhinefang Wolf here, that would discourage an attack, because if they attack and we freeze, then they'll just lose their 6-mana unit and pretty much their whole turn. So Rhinefang's good to stop him from attacking. We don't mind the attack either, though, because we have Troll Chant, so the Yeti would just survive a combat with that Wildclaw. But playing a second Rhinefang here, they do have mana available for Vol Feast. We'll see it here on the Trapper. Again, we want to keep our board full. Yeah, they'll get a 1/1, but we're fine with just attacking everything out, pushing for extra damage, challenge both of their units. Maybe we'll draw a freeze. Look, we pick up the Flash Freeze. That's going to threaten the Wildclaw. So now they have to remove the Rhinefang Wolf to be able to keep their Wildclaw in play. But then at the same point in time, there's so much damage coming around the side. It's a tall order for 8 mana, and then even if they decide to just let it happen, they don't have Ruination mana, so they'll have to Ruination on the next turn. Check out that Trapper art. There's a Yeti hiding in the background. So, yeah, this footage is taken from my stream, so, you know, I got a little bit of that. But, yeah, we see Tryndamere come down, and they'll get the attack token next turn, but we can go ahead and brunch up this Tahm Kench so he can block this Tryndamere, or possibly devour it if they don't open attack. So they do come with the open. We'll take the block with the Kench. They go for the Vengeance. This Vengeance will allow 8 Overwhelm to come through, but we aren't in any trouble of an Atrocity kill, especially now that we developed the Ashe, because the Ashe open attack will reduce that Tryndamere to 0 power. One wolf did get removed, but this other wolf is going to be able to challenge that Tryndamere, threaten it. We have 5 damage even through a Harsh Winds, so they're going to need Harsh Winds plus to be able to survive this combat. It looks like they're just going to die, yep. And yeah, just stay the aggressor. That's the best role in this match. So now we'll get to see one of the more common decks in the meta, Lee Sin. This is Lee Sin Diana, not Lee Sin Zed. So not as aggressive, but still with the same game plan. The idea in this match is to try and establish a Tahm Kench and have enough freezes to be able to freeze and eat through all of their important units, especially Lee Sin. That's where most of the action comes from in the Lee Sin deck. So targeting that with the extra freezes is great. And we see in this hand, you have one freeze effect plus the Archer. You can even pair them. Again, we see Rhinefang and Tahm Kench both being able to take advantage of the freezes. Turn the freezes into actual removal is the idea behind this deck. This video was taken from my stream, so these emotes are a little much. But we see the Rhyme Tusk Shaman. This card is specifically in the deck for this match because generally the biggest unit that they're going to have is going to be their Lee Sin or their Zed. And being able to automatically freeze at the beginning of every round is going to be huge. It's a great combination with Tahm Kench. We see the freeze start. There is Notify now, so that does counter the Acquired Taste. But they can't do that every turn. So we're going to come with the Rhyme Fang Wolf. And then next turn we can start with the freeze, challenge with the Wolf, see what's going on. We have the Troll Chant back in case they do have a Pale Cascade. Okay, right here, just taxing their unit with that. There's a free eat on that Eye of the Dragon. This is going to be a good turn to establish the Shaman. They're going to start with an Acquired Taste on an off unit just to manage this board and get at least one capture with this Kench before establishing the Rhyme Tusk. It also passes priority. That's another good thing about the Acquired Taste. It passes priority to the opponent to get them to commit or, you know, use their mana without knowing about the Shaman. Very big part of it. So the freeze, now we'll try and eat this Lee Sin, see what they do. It's only got 1 power, so easy to eat. Has to use a full deny here. And the Lee Sin is not leveled up, so it can't kick the Kench. There's also a freeze available as well. You're going to see the whole push to try and kill this Rhyme Tusk Shaman. Just going to use a Troll Chant. It's going to win both combats. which is huge. So then we'll just go back to work on the next turn. And now you see we picked apart the wide side of their board, and now we have a full wide board against theirs. So we'll start with the first removal with the Rhyme Tusk. The wolf. See if the wolf can get the kill on the Lee Sin. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Okay, so they do have the Pale Cascade and the level up to get it outside of range for the wolf, but we will just counter with a freeze. Try it now. If that doesn't work, we'll eat it. Even if they happen to pump again, we can eat because Kench has 5 health. We could just go ahead and eat because they've committed so many resources onto this Lee Sin. Even if we get a little damaged Kench and not have to worry too much. Okay, so nothing we can do about the wolf there, but just going to go for the Acquired Taste. Here, they could have Nopify. No, they just Hush, and this Hush is just to make sure that the Kench doesn't level up right now, because it only shows 2 things being captured. Kindly Tavern Keeper, while being a good tool against aggro, it's also great at healing the Kench, so we got the Kench back up to a 2-6, so even some kind of challenge, if they have a Sonic Wave, can't finish it off or force us to actually freeze. And now they're digging hard. Finds Diana, we're just going to eat it before the combat, before anything crazy happens, not even going to freeze it. Just put the 2 damage on the Kench. And this should lock the game up. Yeah, Ranta Shaman, this is the match where it really shines. And you saw its combos with the synergy with the Wolf and the Kench. Next up, we have Trundle Kench. Not a very popular deck, but one that has been brought into the meta a little bit by Mega Mawai. And the Kench mirror, you definitely want Kench. And we'll keep the freeze. We have a nice curve here with the Omen Hawk and the Seer. That whole hand is actually just fine to curve into. Also locking 1 freeze. We see the pickup of the 1 Howlin' Abyss, which is good if a game goes long. It is a 1-of I put in the deck for long matches. Now, this is a point that I want to point out here. Very important that I point out. This Tahm Kench, if you look at this Tahm Kench here, we didn't play the Tahm Kench last turn on turn 4. And the reason we didn't is because our opponent has the odd attack token. And this is super important. Because if we would have played the Kench and they would have played their own Kench, then they would start the next turn with an Acquired Taste and could just Acquired Taste the Tahm Kench. And then they've already won the Kench fight. So you have to pay attention to who is going to act first on the subsequent turn for Tahm Kench. So, like turn 5 here, on their attack token, I can play Kench. Okay, I can just play Kench. It's important. Because Kench eating Kench is the most important thing. So make sure you play around that. Only play Kench on their attack token and a Kench mirror. Unless they've spent their mana and cannot also play a Kench. So definitely pay attention to that. Okay, so now that we have the Kench safely in play, we can actually start eating this Rhymefang Shaman. It's not doing too much on this board, but we can start establishing ours. So this combo is just going to completely wreck our opponent, and there's going to be no way for them to really get out of it. See, they played nothing here, waiting for us to eat. We'll go ahead and use, that threat of eating something. Sometimes people will pass and not play something big, and then we'll just pass back and eat their mana as well and just use that as tempo. And we see them play Howling Abyss. We're lucky enough to have our own Howling Abyss, although we do have the Kench Shaman combo, so whatever they do get would have to be exceptional for us to be able to eat it. We pick up a Katarina. That's pretty huge leveled up, being able to close the game quick attack twice. They actually can't block anything. They have 1 unit that's frozen, so we just start pushing here. We could even double Katarina depending on what they play. Obviously we want to keep eating with this Kench if we can. We have 1 thing frozen. They make our Shaman vulnerable. No big deal. Come with Katarina. We have Troll Chant to protect as well as multiple freezes. So this game is just pretty much waiting to be over. They do slow down the Katarina play with that freeze. I don't think they'll have a unit that they can play for 3 mana that'll be of any consequence. But even still, we'll wait to eat. We'll just come in for the attack. They try and trade. We come with the Brittle Steel. Okay, nothing but value here. Pumping the top of our deck with the Seer as well. Get the eat on the frozen unit. And, there should be a concession right behind this. Yeah, this combination is really hard to beat without actual hard removal if you rely on things like, Kench. So I guess one way that they could try and get out of this is then play a Kench on our attack turn. But if we play slow with our Kench, then they can't do anything about it. And to round out the video, we have a match against Lee Sin Zed, the more popular version of Lee Sin. Again, we're going to be looking to try and get some freezes paired with a Kench or a Wolf to really pressure their main threats. Omen Hawk's nice because if an early Zed comes down, we could have a blocker to try and stop it from leveling. We see here we do have the Wolf, but no good forms of freeze, no recurring ones. Rhyme to Shaman comes to mind. Did get a buffed up Wolf though, so we could develop that with the attack token. It's going to be hard for them to really play a Zed here. They're going to have to take this full amount of damage here, which is a significant counter push. This Mentor is interesting. It's probably worth a challenge just in case they have Lee Sin or something behind it. They do have the Pale Cascade to have the trade, which is good for them. And their hand isn't maxed out by gems, so not going to burn a draw. Here we see the Zed. We could start with a freeze, but that freeze could happen after combat as well. Decide to actually play the Archer, just completely shut down this combat this turn. Next turn, we're going to try and set up the Wolf to actually remove this Zed. If a Lee Sin comes down, there's not much we could do about it with this hand, but clearing out the Zed would be important. And this pass here makes the decision tough. We could potentially pass, but we have a lot of damage to actually push. And we're just going to offer the trade without the freeze. That way they don't have any chance to counterplay. They do come with a second Zed, which is not great for us, but we do pick up an Ashe, and I'm thinking about potentially freezing. If you freeze here, the problem is it does go up to a 1-4, but that 1-4 doesn't really get a good attack into this Hearthguard. So it is still going to be shutting down combat this turn. We don't see Lee Sin yet. So still a very strong board. With this Ashe in hand, we're going to be able to get a good attack in on the next turn with the Ashe, freezing their best blocker. And then this Harsh Winds could be good defensively, but it's also really good with Ashe. If you have Ashe out and this Harsh Winds, you can freeze with the attack and level up Ashe all at the same time and really just take your opponent out in one swing and make sure that they can't block with anything on the board. And being at 20 health, we'll see this Tavern Keeper come in, as we saw in previous games, and just heal up your unit. It's a very big effect to just heal your own unit, because this is going to be a good blocker. The 6/6. Now the Zed is big enough to get through, but it's not leveled yet. We can actually block the shadow without much trouble. You kind of want to develop a Kench because it takes a turn to get the acquired taste, which is again going to be great with the freezes we have available to us, the Ashe and whatnot. And if an attack comes off this turn with the Zed, we'll get a little more board space. With as many freezes in this deck, you do have to manage your board space a decent amount. There is the one Howling Abyss as well. So board space is always a consideration. If you can get some jump blocks in or some trades in, sometimes it's valuable. Definitely assess that based on your hand size to where you're not left with no plays or having to overwrite your own units. So the opponent's really tanking hard on this turn. We do still have Harsh Winds available on this attack. We'll start the emote game. The opponent definitely feels the pressure. Doesn't even attack. So we pick up the acquired taste. Start with the Ashe. This Rhyme Touch Shaman is huge because we can develop it alongside the Ashe after the attack. And again, we're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive with our attack just to make board room for this Rhyme Touch Shaman. Maybe even just getting some damage on some things. Okay, going to gem up the Lee Sin. That levels it up to a 5 power unit, which can still be eaten by the Kench. It has a barrier as well. So, gonna just go ahead and throw, even though one of these units will probably just die to the Lee Sin. Maybe we get some damage on the Zed. This attack is also representing the possibility of moving their unit down to Brutal Steel range. We don't see a block from the Lee Sin, which I thought was kind of weird. But that's the thing. When you have that much mana, you can bluff a decent amount of things. And we cleared room to play the Ronto Shaman, which will freeze the Zed at the start of turn. And we have the Harsh Winds for the Lee Sin if they try and kick it on the next turn. We do get the free eat here, mostly free. We do have a buffed up Kench, so taking 1 damage. We're going to start with a deny to stop the first eat, to try and really... the Dragon Lane's valuable here because of how much pressure we had on them in the early game. And we see the Overwhelm come down on the Lee Sin to try and OTK us potentially, or get a lot of damage in. We top take the Icefield Archer, which is nice and clean because it goes through Bastion if they had it without having to actually Harsh Winds preemptively. So this 2-0 drops. We still have the taste. We're going to be looking to actually eat the Lee Sin before the Zed. That's obviously the scarier threat in the matchup. And our opponent's just pretty well stuck. Shaman's still hanging out. Needs to try and challenge. This is where they really need a Sonic Wave to maybe challenge. But no unit in play is big enough to actually take out the Kench. Okay, so Bastion being the play, we're going to go ahead and try and burst that shield. We could take out the lifesteal by reducing the Dragon Lane down to 0. Bursting the shield to make sure this kick goes off. And the kick will... I mean, not this kick, this taste. Because if we eat this Lee Sin, this game's over with. Again, already committed a Zenith Blade onto it. Gonna have to find a whole another Lee Sin. They're already way behind on board. We see the Shin emote go up. And yeah, this matchup's pretty good. Both versions that we played against. Well, after playing some games, I decided to make some changes to the list. The deck was performing well against the Zed Lee Sin decks and the other Lee Sin decks, and it had a pretty good game against War Mothers. But what I was finding was another top deck in the format is Swain TF. And that matchup is pretty difficult because they have an abundant amount of removal to actually stop you from pressuring them. And I found myself running out of gas in the mid to late games. Not only in that matchup, but other mid-range control decks were giving me a little bit of trouble because we didn't pressure that well. And I decided to actually cut the Seer for Hired Gun. This is twofold because the configuration before relied on a lot of freezes to actually use those as removal. But the problem with playing freezes as your main source of removal paired with Rhymefang and Tom Kench is that if you don't have Rhymefang and Kench, the freezes don't do enough. But Hired Gun could allow you to actually get vulnerable to their largest unit. In particular, Swain, whenever they would play a Swain, you can maybe break up a Swain before a Leviathan comes down to give you some time to set up, because you can't reasonably rely on Kench fully because they have so much removal, like with Flock and all the other damage. Also, I decided to add 2 Salvage and the second Howling Abyss to give us some more staying power in the mid and allow us to also play a late game with Howling Abyss and Salvage, especially if the games involve a lot of passing early in control matchups or against decks that try and play the control role against us. We can get into a Howling Abyss, and then that could be difficult for them to deal with. So, ticked up on the Howling Abyss. Ended up cutting a Harsh Winds to make room for that. Harsh Winds is nice with Ashe trying to make the OTK, but it is just out and out the most expensive freeze. Flash Freeze has been picked up over Harsh Winds in a lot of decks just because of how cheap it is. It's really a better freeze than Harsh Winds at the current time in this meta. Also went down on a Troll Chain and a Brittle Steel. Brittle Steel being one of the worse freezes as well. It doesn't hit the big stuff. It is nice early, but definitely had to make some cuts here to make room for the extra card draw. And like, you can get bottled up with multiple of the Brittle Steels in your hand. So yeah, these are, I think, all pretty good changes. You could also do some other things, as you saw in the gameplay, of maybe swapping Ashe for Trundle. We did add the Salvage and the Hired Gun. This isn't really a tough consideration. But in the original version of the deck that I built, I was playing Avarosian Outriders for the Allegiance. I did like it for high rolls, and it is a good card if you're having trouble having enough pressure on control opponents, especially if you curve a Trapper into an Outrider and you end up with a 1-mana 8/8 Yeti with Overwhelm. But it being a 4-drop did conflict with Ashe and Tom Kench. But I think if you switched Ashe and went into a Trundle deck, the Outrider might not be that bad, in which case you would want to cut down on some of these Botch Border cards to make sure you don't miss with it. Maybe go all the way down to Tom Kench. That's another consideration, because if you get an Outriders on a Trundle, then the Trundle's already doing a lot without having to be leveled up. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the deck. Stay tuned. There's going to be ladder videos coming out every week. And if you have any questions, make sure you type them on the Patreon, or you could join the IQ Discord. Ask any questions there. If I don't see them when you ask them, make sure you just add me, because I look at all the notifications. One love, everybody. Good vibes, and we'll catch you on the next video.